Hey friends, it's Steven with Leviathan Snakes, and for this week's video, we are going to go really in depth to try to answer the question, when should you start breeding rodents for your ball python breeding business? Now, we have done a bunch of research, we got a bunch of data, we did a bunch of stuff in Excel, so that way we could try to answer this question. So a lot of this video, we're going to be using B-roll from Excel, so it's not going to be so much of like showing off cool snakes for it. Now, we do want to say a huge thanks to BarP24, who had commented on our ball python breeder mistakes or pro move dual sired clutches. And essentially they were asking us to make a video answering this question. So we really appreciate the inspiration, the suggestion. We think that this is going to be an awesome video. We are going to go through and we are going to answer very definitively exactly how many snakes does it take before it makes sense to start breeding your own rodents. And if you want to change any of these variables that we talk about, if you want to do anything for yourself, send us a DM on Instagram and we will send you over the Excel file that we use to calculate all of this. You can plug in your own numbers and you can get the exact answer when it will make sense for you. So we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you do, please like, comment, subscribe, and let's jump into it. This video has a bunch of notes. So if I'm looking down, that's what's going on. There's way too many numbers and there is no way that I could remember them all. Also, if you notice that we only have one angle for this video because my favorite lens, the 22mm prime lens Canon for the M50, had died on us and the autofocus doesn't work right now. So we got to go get a new lens and all of that stuff. So until we do that, we got to use our R7, which is awesome because it's actually the better camera, but that means that we can't do our cool little dual angle shots for this video. So we are going to be using for this example ourselves. So we have 78 snakes right now, and that changes a little bit. When we have hatchlings, we have more. As we sell hatchlings, it goes down, but we have 78 snakes right now, so that's what we are going to be going for through this whole entire scenario. If you have a different amount of snakes, that is perfectly fine. Again, this Excel sheet that we have made will allow you to put in all of the different numbers that are specific to you, so that way you can get the exact right answer for you. But we use us as kind of the guinea pig to kind of illustrate how it works. So the very first thing that we want to do is our baseline in feeding a ball python collection is buying rodents from somebody. Whether this is frozen thawed from someplace like Cold Blooded Cafe, or if it is live rodents that you get from a local rodent breeder. But there are various different price thresholds depending on the size of the rodent, the type of the rodent, and the location that you are at in the country. So while we go through this whole situation, we have identified really 4 different categories, and that is the price of frozen thawed, the average price of frozen thawed, the average price of live rodents if you are in a low cost of living area, a medium cost of living area, and a high cost of living area. And for our example that we're using for this, we did $3 is the average price of a rodent for frozen thawed, $3 is the average price for a low cost of living area like the one that we are in. We actually spend about $3-ish per rodent on average for all of our 78 a week. $5 is the medium cost and $7.50 is the high cost. Now, again, you may have a different scenario. That's perfectly fine. I've heard some people paying like upwards of $10 per rodent, and that is wild. And we'll actually show you how wild that is in this breakdown. Once you have set the individual prices for your area, whatever you want to do in this scenario, we need to look at what would it cost to feed our entire collection each week for those prices. So for frozen thawed or live, since they're the same price at $3 per rodent, for us at 78 snakes, it would be $234 a week on average. For a medium cost of living area, it would be $390 a week, and for a high cost of living, it would be $585 a week to feed all 78 of our animals. Now, if you are extrapolating that per month, that means monthly for the frozen thawed or low cost of living, it is $936. If it is the medium cost of living, it is $1,560, and if it is the high cost of living, it is $2,340 a month if you are buying rodents, every single rodent that you buy, and you're not producing anything yourself. Over an entire year, 1 year of doing this, you would end up spending more than $11,000 if you are buying frozen thawed or low cost of living prices for those live rodents, you'd end up spending more than $11,000, $11,232 to feed all 78 snakes over a whole year. You would end up spending $18,720 if you have to pay $5 per rodent on average. And if you had to pay $7.50 per rodent on average, you would end up spending $28,040 in order to feed 78 snakes throughout an entire year. So those are really, really big numbers, especially if you are just getting into breeding ball pythons. Now, I don't mean this to like scare people off, because I do think that is completely doable in order to have a breeding business and not get crushed by feeding costs. But I do think that it's smart to be aware of them, because if you're aware of them, you might start to think, all right, if I'm going to be spending $30,000 a year to breed or to feed my collection, maybe I should just breed them myself. If I breed them myself, maybe I can sell off some of the extras, feed my own collection, and go with it. Okay, so that's usually what happens. But what we want to do now is we don't want to just simply go off of the idea of, yeah, let's just breed them ourselves and not have to worry about paying it. Instead, what we want to do is we want to know exactly how many snakes would it make sense to breed rodents versus buying rodents. Because when you breed rodents, there is a lot of stuff that you have to buy, oftentimes up front, before you can even do it. So let's jump into the breeding side of things. On the breeding side, we got some breeding expenses. The very first expense that we want to talk about are breeding enclosures for the rodents. And there's lots of different ways that you can go about doing this. You can have some DIY racks, you can have some professional stuff like Freedom Breeder or ARS or anything like that. There's lots of different ways that you can set up enclosures to breed rodents. What we use we have like a couple DIY racks and we have a Freedom Breeder rodent rack. So we have spent about $3,000 in our breeding racks in order to breed rodents. So we're going to use that as our base for us because that's the actual number that we have. So we spent $3,000 for breeder racks. Then we have to have grow out space, because as soon as a rodent is born, that doesn't mean that it's big enough to provide an adequately sized meal for an adult ball python. So you need to be able to grow those rodents up to the appropriate sizes. And in order to do that, you need to have other enclosures so that way you can grow them up and not get overrun with rodents in the maternity tubs. So for breeder racks, we have spent about $1,000 on various DIY breeder racks, or grow out racks, not breeder racks, I apologize on that. So that way we can just have that space to grow out the rodents. So right now we are in for a total of $4,000 just to have the enclosures to breed enough rodents to feed our collection. Moving on from the grow out rodent racks, we have weekly expenses because you have to feed your rodents and you have to change their bedding. So we change all of our enclosures bedding for rodents once every week. So every single week we are changing all of the bedding, complete change out of all of it, and it takes Courtney and I together about an hour and a half to do it. So if you are actually like extrapolating that, it's about 3 hours worth of time split between two people. But if you're doing it yourself, you might go slower because you don't have as much synergy as having one person go out and clean a tub while the other person is prepping the rodents in their new enclosure. Now, for us, we spend with all of that, with all of our rodents and things like that, however many total that we have, which we will get to in a second, we spend about $60-ish a week for anything related to the rodents. This is about a bag of Missouri rodent breeder a week and about a bag and a half or so of aspen bedding that we use, and that's what we use to handle our weekly expenses for breeding rodents. Now, moving on from weekly expenses, you may need to buy rodents, at least initially, that are not the same price as feeders. Because if you are breeding rodents, a lot of rodent breeders don't want to sell you female rodents, or they don't want to sell you female rodents with the intention that you're going to be breeding, because it's going to end up cutting out business for them in the future. So oftentimes when you are buying female rodents for breeding, they are more expensive. And it just kind of depends. Oftentimes, if you are just buying rodents in bulk, if you're getting like 100 rodents a week just in feed, you're probably getting female rodents in there anyway, and you can just kind of pull them out. You can get it for way cheaper. But if you're just going to stock all of your rodent breeding colonies right away by buying rodent breeders, we're just going to budget $500. We didn't do that, but we're just going to budget $500 in this for your total startup cost to buy all of your breeder female rodents. Breeder male rodents don't really matter because you can buy them as feeders so cheap. Now, moving on from your rodents themselves, you may run into a situation where you can't actually breed rodents in your home. Maybe you don't have a garage, maybe you don't have a shed or something like that, and you need to put up a small rodent facility in order to breed the rodents there. If that comes in, it is a completely different scenario, which we haven't had to deal with. We have this for the snakes, but we don't have our rodents here. We have our rodents in our home. So if you have that scenario, you end up getting a situation where you're going to be spending a lot of money on the facility, which we haven't had, but we did account for that in the Excel sheet. So if you want to put in whatever the cost of a facility would be to breed rodents, you can put that in there too, and it will calculate, still give you the right breakdown of exactly when you should start breeding your own rodents versus buying rodents. Now, we say all of these different expenses, but it does matter how many snakes that you have is going to influence how many rodents you need to breed, how many enclosures you need, all of that different stuff. So what I do, so rats specifically, they lay about 8 to 16 rat pups per litter, and they have litters roughly about once every 2 months, a little bit less than that. I would probably say about once every 6-ish weeks. I think they have like a 20-something day gestation period, but just because they gestate over 20 days doesn't mean that as soon as they have a litter, they're immediately gonna have another one 20 days later. So I would say about 6-ish weeks, but for the sake of ease of numbers, what we said is that a female rat will have 10 babies per litter on average on the lower side, and they will have 6 litters a year. So a female rat, one female rat can produce 60, is that right? Yeah, 60 baby rats every single year. So what we have done is we kind of did a bunch of guesswork and figured it out, and we kind of realized that for every single ball python you have, if you have one female rodent kind of assigned to them and that's what they're producing, you're probably going to be in a good place. Like that's right about the level that you need. If you want to make it easier so that we have a better flow of rodents, you might go more than one rodent per snake, but we're going to say one rodent per snake, so we have 78 snakes, so we need 78 breeder female rodents, which if we have 78 breeder female rodents, we are going to get average 10 pups per litter. We're going to get 6 litters per rodent per year, which with 78 females means that we would get 4,680 rodents in an entire year, which if we divide by 52, since there's 52 weeks in a year, we will end up with about 90 rats on average per week. And there's a whole part of breeding rodents to like kind of handle when you have the babies and when you don't have the babies, because when it's hatchling season, you're gonna have way more mouths to feed, and when it's not hatchling season, it's like the thick of breeding season, you have a lot of snakes that are off food. There is a art, science, I don't really know, to actually handling the logistics of breeding rodents that we haven't really nailed down yet. But in general, we're just using this for easy numbers, that at 78 female rodents, you will end up producing on average 90 rat pups per week. And if every snake eats one rodent per week, that's gonna be about good. You'll be good there for this specific scenario. So with all of this said, we can start to answer the question of when does breeding become cheaper than buying? So all of this together, we have kind of 2 different breakdowns here. There's your first year of breeding rodents, because your first year of breeding rodents is going to be when you spend money on all of your enclosures. It's going to be when you buy your initial stock if you are going to be breeding the rodents themselves, or you're going to be growing them up or anything like that. So your first year is different than year 2, 3, 4, and beyond. So we're going to break it down like that. And the way that I've tried to answer this question is, in the first year, if you were to decide to, I'm gonna breed rodents instead of buying rodents, if in that first year it would be cheaper to breed the rodents versus buying the rodents, that's your break-even point. So for us specifically, if we were to breed, be 100% self-sufficient breeding rodents, which right now we're not, because again, the logistics part of it is kind of hard. Sometimes we do have to get a couple rodents just because we don't have any that are the right size. Now, right now, if we were completely self-sufficient versus completely buying rodents, we would save $87 per week from breeding rodents versus buying frozen thawed or low cost of living rodents for us every single week. So $87 per week for breeding versus buying is how much we'd save. If it was each month, we would end up saving about $350. And across the entire year of breeding rodents versus buying rodents, we would end up saving about $4,198, which is pretty good. But somebody may look into this and be like, that's decent, you are saving money, but what about all of the time that you're putting into it? And I completely get that. You can calculate how much you would be like paying yourself, if that makes sense, by taking the difference that you would end up saving and dividing that by the amount of hours that you spend working on the rodents each month. Now, if you were going to only look at it from the first year, I might say that it's not really worth our time, because really in an entire month, we're only saving about $350 to breed the rodents versus buying the rodents. But when we move on to more animals, or we move on to year 2, 3, 4, after being completely self-sufficient of breeding rodents, the savings gets better. So your second year, you aren't buying racks, breeder racks and holdback racks and all of those things, or grow out racks for the rodents. Instead, you're just spending that weekly upkeep, the feed, the bedding, stuff like that in order to care for them. So for the frozen thawed or the low cost of living rodents, for us specifically at 78 Snakes, year 2, we are saving $174 per week. We are saving $696 per month. And throughout the whole year of year 2 and beyond, we are saving on average $8,352 to breed rodents versus buying all of our rodents. Now, this is just for the frozen thawed, low cost of living, all of that stuff. What happens if if we were in a medium cost of living or a high cost of living? So with a medium cost of living, we right now, for first year, if we were breeding rodents and all that stuff, we would be saving $243 a week for breeding versus buying. We would be saving $974 per month for breeding versus buying. And for an entire year at the medium cost of living, we would end up saving $11,686 to breed rodents versus buying rodents. Then year 2, for the medium cost of living, we would be saving $330 per week. We would be saving $1,320 per week. And per month, $1,320 per month. And for the entire year of year 2 and beyond, for a medium cost of living, given our collection size, we would be saving $15,840. So I feel like that the medium cost of living is the one where you're really starting to see the benefits of breeding rodents. But if you move up to the high cost of living, if you're spending $7.50 on average per rodent, you should probably be breeding rodents almost right away. But let's jump into the numbers about it. So if you are spending $7.50 on average per rodent and you are buying rodents for your entire collection, if you were to breed all of your rodents instead, you would end up saving $438 per week for the first year. And also in the first year, but for each month, you would end up saving $1,754. And over the entire first year, not even going into the second year yet, you would end up saving $21,046 if you were to breed your rodents versus buy your rodents at $7.50 per rodent on average. At year 2 and beyond, if you're high cost of living, it's wild. So each week you end up saving about $525. At a month of year 2 breeding rodents per month, you're saving about $2,100. And across the whole year, year 2 and beyond, breeding rodents versus buying rodents at $7.50 average per rodent, you would end up saving $25,200. So there are lots of numbers. I know I've said a bunch of things. I've kind of had things jumping up on the screen, but we are going to show you this spreadsheet so that way you can calculate it yourself. I actually think it's easier to just see all the numbers yourself and digest it as you go rather than hearing somebody talk about it. But we still have to answer the question, at what point, how many snakes does it take before it is their break-even point, before it starts being cheaper to breed your rodents versus buy your rodents? And we are going to make it a little bit harder for breeding rodents, and we are going to focus only on the first year. We're not even going to consider year 2, 3, 4, 5 benefits, only the first year. So if you were to decide to breed all of your rodents right now, and in your first year, you want to make sure that you are going to have a better deal at the end of the day. If you are feeding frozen thawed or low cost of living, $3 per rodent, to all of your snakes right now, you need about 49 snakes before it makes sense to start breeding your rodents, given all of the breeding expenses that we outlined earlier. If you have a medium cost of living area, if you are spending $5 per rodent on average to feed all of your snakes, you are going to need about 30 snakes before it makes sense to start breeding your rodents. And if you have a high cost of living area and you are spending $7.50 per rodent on average to feed all of your animals, about 20 snakes is the break-even point. So again, all of these can change. So if you have less expenses to actually start breeding your rodents, it is going to be a lower number. But if you are using our expenses, if you're using our situation that we just outlined, those are the numbers when somebody should start breeding rodents themselves instead of buying it. I know this was a bunch of stuff, but we hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, if you want the worksheet yourself, so that way you can put in your own numbers and kind of play around with it, send us a message on Instagram and we will email it to you. So we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next week.